Did you know that you can get this same great episode of the Rural Woman Podcast ad-free? I get it. Listening to ads during a podcast isn't always my favorite either. But in order to keep the lights and coffee pot on here at the Rural Woman Podcast Studios, they are necessary. I am so grateful to each and every one of my sponsors, but if you yourself would like to skip the ads while supporting the show, consider joining me over on Patreon. Patrons of the Rural Woman Podcast get ad-free episodes starting at Tier 5 on their podcast player of choice each week, plus some other great benefits. Find out more by heading to the link in today's show notes to learn how you can become a patron through Patreon. Hi, I'm Caitlin Dubin, and this is the Rural Woman Podcast. I'm a first-generation farmer who married into agriculture. Born and raised in a city, I was so unfamiliar with where my food came from, but I was determined to figure it out. Through my journey into agriculture, I saw women who were strong but humble, often taking a back seat. To me, these women were leaders who deserved a seat at the table. I created the Rural Woman Podcast to share the voices of women in an industry whose stories often went untold. The rural entrepreneurs who live and breathe their work, full of grit and pride. We come here to share our stories, to be in community with each other, to be challenged and inspired, but most importantly, to be celebrated and to be heard. We may not all live, farm, ranch, or homestead the same, but we are all connected. We are rural women, and our stories are worthy of being told. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Rural Woman Podcast. Today you'll meet Kirbe Schnoor. Kirbe is a storyteller, broadcaster, and advocate for rural communities. Raised on her family's almond farm in California, Kirbe eventually moved to Fort Worth, Texas, where she hosted a daily cattle market broadcast with Superior Livestock Auction. That opportunity led her to ag reporting with RFD-TV, covering everything from rodeo stars to rural entrepreneurs, always spotlighting the heart and hustle of agriculture. Now, as the host of Dirt Diaries, the FarmHER RanchHER Podcast, Kirbe is creating space for unfiltered conversations with women in ag, sharing stories of growth, grit, and resilience. And speaking of the Dirt Diaries podcast, I recently had the honor of being a guest on Kirbe's show. If you'd like to hear my episode of the Dirt Diaries podcast, head to our show notes where I have left a link to my episode. Without further ado, my friends, let's get to this week's episode with Kirbe. Kirbe, welcome to the Rural Woman Podcast. How are you today?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited to chat with you. We've been getting to chat with each other a lot lately, and I love it. So for the folks who are unfamiliar with you, Kirbe, give us your background. Tell us who you are, where you're from, and what your connection to agriculture is.
Well, we have been getting to chat a lot recently, and it's been fun, especially just sharing the mutual love for agriculture and the industry with you. And I just really appreciate everything you're doing. So again, thank you for having me on. My name's Kirbe Schnoor. I grew up in a small town in the Central Valley of California. It's called Chowchilla. It's a rural area, very diverse agriculture area. And my family, they used to be more diverse in what they grew there, but we are mainly almonds now. We still have a custom hay business that we do alfalfa, some tomatoes, things like that. But back in the day, it was cotton, corn, all the things. As time went on, we just mainly focus on almonds now. And like I said, hay and a little bit of tomatoes. But yeah, so I grew up just, with a farming family, and that was the lifestyle. That was dinner convo. And I went on to Fresno State University in California, where I majored in mass communications and journalism with an emphasis on broadcast journalism. And I thought I'd learn something outside of the agriculture scope because I grew up showing livestock all over the country. My sisters and I, we have a cattle company called Schnoor Sisters Cattle Company, and we showed very competitively. We had fun. We made a lot of friends, connections, networked, which led me to my career that I'm into today. After college, I got a job in Fort Worth, Texas, and not easily. That story is kind of interesting. Was Superior Livestock Auction, and they had several programs on RFD-TV. They didn't really have a spot for me at the time, but I said, I'll answer phones, I'll take out trash, I'll do whatever. There's something about Fort Worth, but definitely Superior Livestock and the culture there and the people. And I just wanted to be a part of that side of the cattle business and what they were doing and be a part of the industry in some way. I knew I never wanted to go into hard news. I wasn't quite sure. Back in the day, I used to love to write and do all of that. But as we know, newspapers, all of that became kind of a dying industry in a sense. There's obviously still a place for that, and you can write on web and things like that. But it just really, I graduated too at the time. So I'm backing up. So I'm jumping all over the place, but where there weren't any jobs. And so that was like the 2012, 2013, 2011, 2013, where it was just a really tough few years. People weren't hiring. The economy wasn't at its, best, if you will. And so, but I wasn't afraid to do anything. Like I said, take out the trash, answer phones, all of it. So fast forward, made my way to Fort Worth and got a job with Superior Livestock and doing that, literally answering the phone, helping on the bid line, wherever they needed, filing papers. And on the side of that, kind of helping out with the production team with their shows, The American Rancher, Superior Sunrise, any other projects that they were doing that they aired on RFD-TV. Fast forward many years, several years, I should say, 6 or 7, Patrick came to me and he's like, okay, I got to the point where I was hosting Superior Sunrise and a few other things on RFD-TV, through Superior Production, Superior Livestock Auction. And he said, I want to start something called the Cowboy Channel. Instead of you moving to Nashville, coming to work for RFD-TV, will you just get your things, move across the street in the stockyards? I got the visitors building. That's going to be our office space. And we're going to start a sister network called the Cowboy Channel and focus on Western sports, Western lifestyle, and Western events, if you will. And so did that and was there until I guess I made the switch. I took a little break and just kind of freelanced for about a year, not that long ago. And then Patrick once again called me and he said, we bought the brand FarmHER. I would like you to come host the show. I previously hosted the first season of RanchHER. And he's like, we're rebooting all of it. And so will you come host that? And Janie Johnson was going to host RanchHER, and her and I worked together for many years and just had so much fun. And I just said, sure, you know what? I love this industry. It means so much to me because just going back to square one, it's what I grew up in. It's, my family's livelihood. Obviously, they're passionate about it, but it's also what puts food on our table, as we know, many others as well. And so it's just been such a full circle to be in the role that I'm in and tell the stories across the United States and beyond about agriculture, the families a part of agriculture, and seeing that come to the screen on so many people's homes is just so rewarding. And I love it. I feel like it's my way of being connected to the industry that's given myself and obviously my family and so many others so much.
Absolutely. Kirbe, we have so many things to dive into. I've been making notes over here about all of the cool parts of your story. There's just so many facets to it, and it all comes back to agriculture, which I really love. Take me back to growing up on the farm. What are some of your favorite memories growing up on the farm?
Oh, yeah. So my dad is a farmer. My mom helped out. She grew up in a farming and a cattle ranching family. My dad was predominantly, his family were farmers, and he had 3 daughters. And so we just have so many great memories of getting out there, getting in the field. We would bale hay, and we would bale it usually late at night. And it was just always so much fun. And so growing up, before we were able to drive and the balers and things like that, I remember taking a sleeping bag and a book and, laying in the back of the old truck when my dad was baling, and with my sister, my older sister at the time. And it was just so many memories like that. Just being a part and being with my family and being out there on the farm, I just really enjoyed that. And then I don't know, I didn't know any different, I guess, too, because we are about 2.5 hours south of San Francisco, and I would say 3.5 to 4 hours north of LA. And so we got to go, to this big city and do all the things. And, people will always say, oh, you guys are those California farmers. Well, in our community, it is so awesome to see. And I go back every year, usually for our county fair even. And there's a lot of dairy farmers. There's a lot of produce farmers, obviously. There's a variety of things that we are surrounded by pertaining to agriculture and even livestock. And it's just such a great community full of wonderful people who, yes, predominantly are a part of the agriculture industry, but even in a broader scope are giving to our nation just so much more. I feel like there's so many people obviously putting food on individuals' tables and families' tables, but that are fighting, in DC for policies, and even obviously in the state of California for things and water rights. And that's a whole nother gamut. But I think growing up, I just have so many great memories of family time together and understanding the land, appreciating what my family was doing, but also understanding the hardships. There's good and bad years in farming. And my mom would always laugh. She's like, you pray for rain, but it always comes at the wrong time. And then you're kind of like, dang it, God, like that's not really one that, we needed it to rain. And it's just an interesting thing. There's a lot of life lessons that you learn on the farm, and there's a lot of valuable lessons. And there's a lot of things that I think at some point in my life probably took for granted. But the older I get, I really recognize and realize the lifestyle is just so rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing about rain here in the month of July, we've had the most rain on calendar ever, according to my historical meteorologist, which is my husband. But it's funny because, like you said, yes, we would love some rain, but not now, not too much. And it needs to come in at the right angle, right? I think for me, farming has taught me that I really need to hold plans loosely because anything can happen, right?
Mm-hmm, definitely.
What was it about journalism and media that attracted you to dive into this industry?
I've always watched the news as a young child. And like I said, I knew I never really wanted to go into hard news. But my first major, I should say, was political science. So I kind of thought I would be an attorney at some point, and maybe even an ag attorney, and fight for water rights, because that is one of our number one things in California. As things change, plans change. When I was in college, I was like, okay, I'm not going to keep going to school for all of this. And so I had switched my major, like I said, to mass communications and journalism, because I just was fascinated with storytelling and with that, the news. And so I think when it all unfolded for me and I became a young adult in my early stages of my career, I realized everyone has a story to tell, and everyone's story matters, and it looks different everywhere you go. And so I wanted to be a person that was able to help individuals, families, you name it, tell their stories on whatever scope they wanted to tell them, however they wanted to tell them, and in whatever capacity they wanted to tell them. And so in doing so throughout the years, I think even just from agriculture to livestock, but even Western sports, I've been able to interview so many people like on red carpets and talk about Western fashion and the evolving of that and how it's changed over the years. But then it's come back to, I don't know, how people used to dress in the old times and just different things like that. So that's been fun. I've interviewed Western sports and athletes, on the rodeo trail. And it's just been fun to talk about their competitive side and just being out on the road and what that's like for family. And then obviously on FarmHER RanchHER, which it's a 30-minute show, is to really dive in deep and talk about, what they do and why they love the land, why they're stewards of the land, and, why they're in the occupation that they're in, or sometimes go deeper and just talk about, their family and hardships and, triumphs and trials. And so I just really find it fascinating to get to know people on that level and be someone almost like a listening board, if you will, but just a platform for them to be able to share something that's so important and special to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you'd mentioned, where you are in California, there is a large rural population farming community. But like you said, just outside of that, there are millions of people where you are that don't have that connection to a farm. And getting to connect people to these stories that maybe they wouldn't hear otherwise, I think is truly special. Has there ever been any memorable moments that stick out to you from telling these stories and connecting with somebody who maybe didn't know about this part of agriculture or was unfamiliar with it, connecting to consumers? Any memorable moments for you?
Oh gosh, there's so many over the years. I'm like, I don't want to date myself, but I'm 36 and I started doing this at 23. And so I've been able to share so many stories for so many years and connect with so many different people from rural to city. And it is interesting. I don't know if there's anything in particular where it sticks out to me where somebody wasn't aware of, I know there are moments that I've had where people aren't aware of agriculture, but I think for the biggest thing for me is when I've went to conferences or I've spoke and been a part of panels or different things like that is the understanding of California agriculture more specifically, I think. And it is the number one agriculture state in America, and take away all the other craziness that is happening there, right? We need California and we need that state and agriculture in that state to survive, to be able to provide the way they provide. And I think being able to speak to even people who are in our industry and make them realize that has been an interesting and also challenging position I have been put in at times. Over the years, I guess I want to highlight, I've been able to interview Temple Grandin, and she was fascinating to me on her cattle handling practices. And that's just a really memorable interview of just how she's handled controversy in the industry and, how she's overcome so many things. And she's just such a fascinating individual. But yeah, there's been so many moments, right, where I've encountered people just would disconnect from understanding rural America. But like I said, more specifically, the disconnect of understanding California and agriculture has been maybe a more personal one for me that I've just dealt with over the years and will continue to deal with.
Absolutely. Well, and like you said, it's personal to you. So there's heart behind this for you, and there's heart behind all of these stories that you're sharing. You can help support the stories of women in agriculture to be shared through the Rural Woman Podcast on Patreon. What is Patreon? It's a membership-based platform that helps fund and support creators like me to create and produce content like this that you all love. New to the Rural Woman Podcast Patreon is ad-free listening and patron-only bonus content and exclusive episodes. Learn more and join the patron gang today at patreon.com/The Rural Woman Podcast. Talk to me about hosting RanchHER and FarmHER and what that impact has been on you personally.
It's so interesting. I'll never forget when I started with the first season of RanchHER, and my mom said to me, she's like, man, you know what I've realized? We are really bad at telling our stories sometimes and really understanding other people in the industry story. And the way she said it to me and how she said it, and I just summed it up right there, I was like, wow, that's so true. Like, we want to advocate for our industry, but sometimes we don't always do the best job at it, or we don't do the best job for each other at it. And so I really took that to heart when I started the show and hosting it. And I just think it's been interesting, the evolution of the shows, because people really do open up. And I'm so thankful for that. And one of the things that I've noticed too over the years, male, female, I've interviewed obviously both, but we have this show that's specific to women. And the reason for that is because women are more apt to really tell you and kind of get in the nitty gritty of things. I could ask my dad, for instance, like, wow, how are the trees this year? And he's like, good. And I mean, he's such a positive guy, steady Eddie when it comes to those things, but he's really not going to dive deep into the nitty gritty. And he can sometimes if we're talking about policies, and like I'll always mention water issues, or people want to talk about tariffs right now and all those things. But when you really talk about taking it back for, generation to generation, and my family, both families are multi-generational farmers, ranchers, the women are more open and honest about things, and they're kind of raw. And so that's why we've really recognized featuring and focusing on the female in these industries has really opened the gates to really share what is going on in our industry, or why people are part of this industry, why they do what they do, why they love what they do, why they sometimes hate what they do. And so I just am so thankful that people let us come to their property and expose their lifestyle in a way. Obviously, everything that we do, we want to do it for the good, and we want to put them in the best light and what they're doing in the best light. But the willingness to be able to be open and share, it's been so interesting, and it's been an exciting adventure. And I really am so grateful for this opportunity and for the individuals and the families who have allowed me to be a little part of their story and telling it.
I'm curious, out of all of the interviews that you've done for many years now, has there ever been hesitancy from people to share their stories with you?
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
Because, regardless of viewership numbers, especially when social media now plays, a big role in everything we do, they're opening up for criticism and controversy when they don't have to. And people are always going to throw something negative at somebody, right? If they have the opportunity to. And that's just the way the world is. And that's unfortunate. But and also, I don't blame them for being hesitant, because not only are they showing, their property, their homes, their history of, their family lineage, but their day-to-day routine, their work ethic, they're showing so much, and they're just exposing so much. So yeah, there has definitely been some hesitant individuals, and there's been people who we've interviewed, and we do kind of a rigorous process. Our producer, Katie Avant, and I, and then our team, we are a small team that travels. There's 4 of us that go to these farms. So, it's not an overwhelming experience, but sometimes it is with all of our gear. And it's just, again, and on most, sets of different things, there's 40 people on crews, or at least 15. And so we do what we can with 4 people. And we're really proud of what we do, especially with our small crew, but we don't want to overwhelm these farmers and ranchers. But there's people we have calls with, and they just get to a point where they're like, as much as I'd love to do this and share the story, and we love what you guys are doing, we just can't. And we understand, and everyone has their reasonings. And then they recommend, several people. And I will say this, one of the interesting things to me is every time people are like, they say, well, I don't even know why you'd want to come here. I just think what we do is what we do. It's what we've always done, or it's what we'll continue to do. We're not that interesting. People don't want to hear about what we're doing in our story. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if you only knew. They really do. And it's just, farmers and ranchers, they're just some of the most humble people. And it just, yeah. But the hesitancy, it's definitely there, and rightfully so.
Yeah, absolutely. Having a camera in front of your face is always a little awkward when you're not used to it. I'm sure for you, it gets easier, obviously, from the first rodeo that you've done it. But the part about people feeling like their story's not interesting, it's always my favorite. And it's my favorite tagline, like, hold my beer, like, just wait. Like, by the time we're done this, like, you will sound like the most interesting person. And it's just interesting to me, the doubt that people have to overcome from this. And like, I get it. I'm looking in the mirror when I'm saying these things, but to be able to capture these stories the way that you do and with your team, it's important work that you're doing. And sometimes I know it can feel like, do I have to do this again? A question that you asked me that I thought about afterwards, and I'm like, did I answer that right? What do you do through those times? Or are there times where, you feel like, I just don't think I need to do this anymore?
Yeah, I think that happens to all of us, right? And I mean, I like I said, I'm so grateful that I have this role in my career, and I've had it for so many years, and I have seen so many different places all over the United States. And like I said, even international, I've gotten to travel and tell agriculture stories, but the days are long. And especially this year, I'll just be quite frank and raw with you. There's months where I've been at home or 2 or 3 days out of the month, and I'm blinking and I'm like, we are almost in August. We are almost, in September. I mean, we are almost in 2026. And even looking at my August schedule, it's crazy because there's about 4 days that I'll be home. And so, yeah, it is kind of, you self-reflect, and you think, oh, it won't be bad. And, or, this is why I'm doing this. I love what I'm doing. And I genuinely love it, but I'd be lying if I didn't say it could be tiring and it could be wearing on an individual and on me. I mean, the days that, like I said, are long when we're shooting. They're 12-hour days. There's some prep in it. And then sometimes we're driving 7+ hours, a little less. And we're just trying to get from one place to the next. And being on and communicating with people can also be very draining. And people say, well, you don't have to be on, just be yourself. And I just think I never want to go through the motions. I want to make sure every time I show up on a farm or ranch, or if I show up to a conference, or if, I'm at a rodeo interviewing, I'm giving as much as I can give, and I'm giving 100%. And yes, there are days you can't give 100%, but I know whatever I do, it has nothing to do with me. At the end of the day, it has to do with the people that I'm interviewing and are telling their stories or talking about their ride or their run. And that's the most important thing. And so if I'm so depleted to where I'm not doing a good job, to where it, takes away from the point of, that we're trying to make here and the overall goal, then I'm like, man, I need to step away for a minute. And there was a point in time I stepped away for a year because I had reached that point where I just felt like I'm completely burnt out. And a part of that, I will tell you, it's so interesting to me, is social media is such a fascinating tool, right? People think that, wow, it's so fun. You get to do this. You're going here, you're doing that. And on the flip side, they are so right. It is so fun, but that's just such a highlight reel. I'm like, you have no idea, like, how I would just like to sleep in my own bed or eat at home or, have a routine of some sort. But I say all that now, and I'm like, if this was all gone tomorrow, I would be devastated. So it's just one of those interesting things, and finding balance is also an interesting thing because that's hard to do. And it goes with the saying too, is people say you can have it all, just not all at once. And I genuinely believe that. And so, yeah, there's definitely days where I have questioned and I've wondered, and I'm like, man, when, I've been doing this for a while now. So I'm like, when's the next person going to step up and take over? But like I said, there's just so many stories to tell. And it's my way of giving back to the industry and truthfully giving back to my parents who have given so much to me. And I'm just so grateful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you've said that this year has been super busy. You've also helped launch a podcast and becoming a host of a podcast. So let's talk about that being added to your plate. Tell us all about your new podcast.
Yeah, so Dirt Diaries is a part of the FarmHER RanchHER brand, which is so special because sometimes people don't want a camera right in their face and filming, 12-hour days out on their property, and we completely understand that. And this is just a different way to share the stories of women in the industry. So whether it's from a boardroom to a branding iron and a pin, somebody has a story to share in this industry. And I get to talk to so many different women, and I have a team of, there's 3 of us on it, and it's Jenna, Holly, and myself, and Raquel, our CEO, and her vision with FarmHER RanchHER was to bring back around a podcast with it. And so we brought that to life this year, and that's what we're doing. We are getting to talk to so many different individuals and share their stories. And I'm having fun with it because it just, people open up differently. Obviously, when you're we still have a camera in front of them, but when people are sitting down and they're a little relaxed, you get a different side of things. And so we call it digging in on Dirt Diaries. And that's what we're doing. And so it's really fun. We're having a good time with it.
What has been your favorite thing about this platform and podcasting so far?
I think my favorite thing has been the stories that come about as you're just kind of sitting there talking, and the casual conversation that comes with that, right? We can talk about industry related topics, but sometimes it's not as heavy, and it's talking about what their day looked like. And they're like, oh my gosh, and by the way, Kirby, this happened to me. And then we kind of trail off. And I think that's the beauty in it, is there's just so much freedom with the podcasting and lenience in the fact that people really let their shoulders down and really relax and open up in ways that they wouldn't if we had, several cameras in their face.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I've always said it's like a friend sitting at your kitchen table or somebody in your buddy seat, right? Like it's somebody talking in your ear and they're just casually sharing their story with you. And depending on what you're listening to and what kind of podcast you listen to, like that could be like a broad range of things. I myself am not like a true crime podcast listener.
Yeah.
But what kind of podcasts do you listen to?
I listen to a lot of self-help podcasts, to be honest.
Yeah.
I listen to Lauren Bostick and her husband's, and I can't even think of, now that you asked me that, I can't even think of the name of the podcast right now. But yeah, and they have some interesting guests on there. With the self-help ones, and I read a lot of books like that as well. I'm not a true crime junkie podcast person either. I'll listen to a lot of health and wellness podcasts because I just find those interesting. And then Him and Her, that's what it's called. I also have a friend named Jade. She does a podcast in Austin and she's just really witty and funny. And so that's kind of just like I want to laugh. I want to laugh about anything she's talking about, whether it's, her family dynamics or her boyfriend or, the generations and the trends that are going on TikTok and all these things. And so her and I are the same age. And anyways, so whether they're funny or helpful or insightful, those are kind of the ones I listen to. And yeah, there's a wellness one, Pursuit of Wellness, and I really enjoy listening to hers as well and digging into things like that. Because sometimes those wellness ones, I find it interesting what they talk about, obviously, is a lot of our food sources. And I get ideas when I go then to people's farms and ranches of, hey, this is maybe the angle we need to take because some people, even in that realm of health and wellness, aren't educated on, agriculture and really where their food comes from. And they're the ones educating, the consumer. Yeah.
And they're the ones sharing the story. Yeah, exactly. So the more that we know from the ground up and digging into that ground, right? Like getting those stories out there. That's why it's so important. I know this is hard to do. And I don't like it when people ask me this question, but do you have a favorite episode that you've recorded so far?
Oof, that is hard to do. I don't have a favorite because we've done such a good job. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to toot our own horn. But I love to do that. I'm like, you know what? Other people don't toot your horn, toot your own. I've told people that before. I'm like, I wake up in the morning, I look at the mail and I'm like, you are great. And I'm like, you have to tell yourself that because you might not ever hear that. And somebody else might not tell you that, but you can tell yourself that and you should believe it. So I'm going to toot our team's horn because we've just done such a great job of finding such diverse stories. But there is one story that really sticks out to me. And I have her on I had her on Dirt Diaries as well. And Megan Shanley is her name. And she's a farmer in California over in Morro Bay. And there was just a lot of hardship she faced right off the bat. And this was kind of a hobby of her family's, of her dad's, is having this avocado and then finger lime. Really, really, it's interesting citrus fruit and how it grows. And the story is just fantastic. So I recommend anybody to go listen to her podcast on Dirt Diaries or watch her episode that we aired last year. And her dad suddenly passed away in an accident in Costa Rica. And it was up to her and her husband. And he was in real estate to kind of take over this property and the farming if they wanted to keep it going. And they did, and they do. And through that, there's just been some difficulties within family, obviously within land, within, as we know, pricing of avocados, with their packing houses and who they're using, and just the marketing tools to get finger limes, out there to the public and getting in grocery store, all the challenges that they face. It's just been a roller coaster for her. And I just think she was so raw and honest in the beginning stages on her episode. And now recently having her on the podcast, so much has happened since then. And she's so open and honest just about those challenges and the difficulties and what it's done and the difficulties that are yet to come. And I don't want to say that's my favorite, but it's been such an interesting one to me because of how vulnerable Megan was and her willingness to share that with so many people. I admire it so much.
Yeah. I listened to that episode last week before we chatted and I was blown away. I was absolutely blown away by her story and the vulnerability that she had and the honesty that she had. I think sometimes in agriculture, we are open and we share our stories, but the honesty behind the really hard things can be such a struggle to share because of, family, because of business, because of all of the hardships that can come from that. So yeah, Megan's episode, I have to say that one was really great. So you did a good job.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Good job to Megan. It's all her.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating story, and we will link that show and the rest of your shows and all of the things in the show notes for people to listen and find you. What advice would you give to a young woman who grew up in agriculture, who maybe has bigger dreams than the farm? What advice do you have for them?
Well, I think what's so neat now is there's so many different avenues for women to partake in, especially related to agriculture. So if they don't want to be out on the farm or the ranch, they could be in so many different positions that are related to the industry, whether it is podcasting, having a TV show, working for a television network, working as a seed salesman, working as a fertilizer company, working for any of those corporations and equipment companies. Even I would say, as you could even go on to politics and being a lobbyist. There's just so many ways to be a part of this industry, and there's been so many doors open and seats at tables for women. I really do believe men in this industry are so proud to have females in this industry. They don't ever look at the difference of, oh, she's a woman, she can't do it. And I know people have that stigma and they say that, but the more places I visit and the ranches I go to and the farms I go to, the men there are just so uplifting to the women, and they are just like, get in here and do it. So for a young woman, I would just tell her, find the area you want to go in and go for it. There are no limitations, but the only limitation is yourself. Because I will say this, what I have found is we are our worst critic, and we obviously are hardest on ourselves, and we are our biggest doubter. And so as a female, you just have to really believe in yourself, and you have to trust your gut, and you just have to do it. You really do just have to do it. And by me saying that, I mean, put in the work. Like, don't be afraid to take the job for the company you want to take it for and take out the trash. You cannot be above anything. And that is the struggle I honestly have seen with some of the younger generation females. They handicap themselves because they think they're too good to do some of, the lower, quote unquote, lower tier jobs. And that's what's keeping them from growing, excelling, and being in positions that they really want to be in. So it's just putting in the work and getting their hands dirty and, just communicating and networking and talking to people and all the things that everyone talks about. But yeah, I just think there's so many opportunities, and there's going to continue to be so many opportunities. I mean, look at how many people, you had mentioned to me, I know, talking about doing your podcast, how many women have started podcasts, related to farms and ranches and advocating for the industry and talking about agriculture in so many different ways. I find it fascinating. And people posting on social media and the reels and the TikToks and just all the different things. I mean, it's wonderful. I just think the opportunities are endless for females to be in this industry in whatever capacity they want to be in this industry. They just have to be willing to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the big overall picture for me is we have a choice now of how we show up in this industry. Whereas a number of years ago, there probably wasn't that much of a choice, right? Now we get to decide what we do and where we do it and kind of how it works for us and how we want it to work for us. So I think that's probably the neatest thing. What's next for Kirbe? What's in the future?
Oof. That's a great question. It's a loaded question. I think what's next in the future is to continue being able to travel and tell the stories of this wonderful industry that is so needed. Obviously, everyone has to eat. And aside from just eating, people need clothes on their back. There's so many things that people don't understand that are, come from agriculture and livestock. And so I think just the education aspect is what's next on my agenda, or just on, down my path, to continue to be a part of this industry and give back to this industry. And like I've mentioned so many times already when talking to you, an industry that's just given myself personally so much, but my family so much, and really continue to be grateful for the people a part of it. And however I can tell their stories, share their stories. I want to be able to do that. And so I'm just going to hope that I can continue, down this road and be able to visit with so many people and share their stories.
Keep on keeping on and keep digging in and all of the things. Kirbe, my last question for you, and a question that I ask all of my amazing guests, is what is the most rewarding part about being a rural woman for you?
Ooh, that's a great question. The most rewarding part about being a rural woman is getting to experience what God created and sharing that with others.
It's a privilege that a lot of people wish they had or have had a part of, and we're pretty lucky to live it. So, Kirbe, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. You get to share other people's stories, and I'm so happy to share yours. For the folks who would like to connect with you after the show, where can they find you online?
I'm not the best on my personal social media. I try to be sometimes, but it's just Kirbe Schnoor on Instagram or Facebook. That's the extent of that. But you can always find us on FarmHER or RanchHER on our social media platforms. And we have a great team behind all of that. And then, of course, RFD-TV. And just tune into the shows, tune into Dirt Diaries. There's so many amazing people that are just so awesome. And we get to just, share snippets of their life. And I'm thankful for that.
Absolutely. Thank you again so much for sitting down with me today. I really appreciate it. And we'll talk soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Rural Woman Podcast. The Rural Woman Podcast is more than just a podcast. We are a community. A huge thank you to the Rural Woman Podcast team, audio editor Max Hofer, and a special thanks to our Patreon executive producers, Sarah Riedner from Happiness by the Acre. To learn how you can become a Patreon executive producer or other ways to financially support the show, head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more. Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you listen to the podcast to get the latest episodes directly on your playlist. And if you are loving the show, please be sure to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other platform that accepts ratings and reviews. You can connect with us on social media at The Rural Woman Podcast and with me at Wild Rose Farmer. One of the best ways you can support the show is by sharing it. Send this episode to a friend or share on your social media. Let's strengthen and amplify the voices of women in agriculture together. Until next time, my friend, keep sharing your story. This week's episode of the Rural Woman Podcast is brought to you by the patrons of the Rural Woman Podcast. This amazing group of individuals contribute financially to the Rural Woman Podcast to ensure the stories of women in agriculture hit your earbuds each and every week. Want to join them in supporting the stories of women in agriculture while getting access to extended episodes, patron-only episodes, and other great perks? Head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more about how you can become a patron through Patreon.